Hello everyone, and welcome to the Dice Commando YouTube channel. I'm Andrew, with you here as always. This is Go Again, a fabulous video cast covering the trading card game Flesh and Blood. This video and others like this one are possible thanks to viewers like you. Please show your support with a like and subscribe, and be sure to hit the bell notification icon so you don't miss any new videos. If you want to get involved with the channel, consider becoming a channel member. There are many benefits to channel membership, including access to our Discord, exclusive deck tech and strategy videos, and the opportunity to help create channel content. I want to sincerely thank all our channel members, as I truly couldn't do this without your support. You guys rock. Go Commando.
Hello Flesh and Blood folks, welcome back to Go Again, a fabulous cast here on Dice Commando. So back in October of 2020, it feels like forever ago, Flesh and Blood was in a very, very different place. Obviously Monarch was not out yet, but what was more than that was Crucible was sold out, Unlimited was on the horizon and not quite everywhere, and it was very hard to get product, plus at the same time popularity was growing. And prices were going crazy. Again, there was a shortage of product, and players were having to make very hard decisions about where to put their limited resources, their money, right? And one of the things that Josh and I did back then is we actually made a tier list for legendary equipment, which was basically kind of, in that time addressing that question of, if I have limited resources, which legendary equipment do I need? Which ones can I go without? And so on. But of course, the game's in a very different place than it was back then, and we've actually had some requests. People have reached out and asked to redo the tier list and redo it and update it for Monarch. So that's what I'm doing today, as I'm looking at legendary equipment tier list. I'm looking at modifying and adding to the legendary equipment tier list post Monarch. Hey folks, thanks for tuning in again today for hopefully a fun cast, kind of looking at the tier list. I know people like lists, and they're always kind of fun to do. And it actually seems fitting because we're talking singles. But my buddy over at Fab Foundry, he actually opened up his IRL shop this last weekend called Dis and Dice in Troutdale, Oregon. That's right, it's a brick and mortar LGS now that's working in concert with what he already had over there at fabfoundry.co. And just want to remind everybody that, when you go do singles purchases from them, I actually got a Footsteps this last weekend because they had a 10% off sale and wanted to take advantage of that. But when you do go do singles, if you use the reference link that's in this video, I actually get a small kickback from that. It helps support doing stuff like buying Footsteps, which is really nice. So that's appreciated. And again, go check them out. Good guy, and he's actually, like I said, trying to get IRL stuff off the ground, or has succeeded in getting IRL stuff that I just played in a tournament this last weekend over there. So good guy, and if you're gonna do it, make sure it's good buy. So, all right, what I want to do today is we're gonna start by reviewing the tier list, and then we're gonna make changes. Where I'm gonna make a couple changes to it based on how the meta has evolved since October, things we've learned. Not even just the meta. Obviously, the meta's evolved because new stuff comes out, but more like our play, what we've learned about playing has evolved. And so we'll make a couple changes to that tier list, and then we'll talk about the new equipment where it falls, and then we'll get out of here. So what I have across the screen right now is the previous list from that cast in October 2020. So we had broken the categories down into three categories. It was absolutely essential, which was it's necessary in order to play the class successfully, for the most part, of course. There was nice to have, which is, yeah, it helps a lot, but you could probably win a tournament without it. And then the bottom category, which was you could probably put your resources elsewhere. And remember, putting this in, 2020 terms, and everything was, the Unlimited was not out, and everything was, $400 or $500 or more dollars or more, right? It was, if I don't need to buy something for $400 and I can put that resource elsewhere, let's do it, right? So that was the category, and I think it still holds, right? I mean, people still, even today, you have to choose where to spend your money, and, if you don't need it, probably don't need to buy it, right? So just going through that list, what we had is our absolutely necessary. And again, I encourage you to go back and look at some of the logic on why we put them there at the time, because most of it still holds. But Stormstriders for Wizard and Tectonic Plating for sure were in the absolutely essential, as was at the time Crosswrap. Skullcap we had put in between. Now, I'm not a fan of doing stuff like that because I'm like, oh, there's 3 categories, but I'll put stuff in between to make 5 categories. Yes, that's BS. But again, it was the reason at the time that Skullcap was put where it is was because obviously, right, you look at something like Skullcap and you're like, man, Skullcap is useful to everybody. Maybe that's a high priority equipment. But the issue we had was if I have to make the choice between buying a Tectonic Plating or a Skullcap, and I want to play Guardian, because obviously that's the conversation, then yes, you would go with the Tectonic. So that's why even though Skullcap is probably overall more useful, at the time when everybody was focusing on one class because it's all anybody could afford, it was not as much of a priority. And that's why we put it in between, because it was still really, really, really essential, but not as essential as like your key piece, right? So that's why it fell in between, and that's why we felt okay doing it with that one. In the nice to have category, we had the Brave Forge Bracers, as well as a Mask of Momentum, Scabskin Leathers, and the Teklo Foundry Heart. And at the very, very bottom, we had Grasp of the Arcanite. Many of you are probably laughing thinking about today. So one of the things that I got the most negative feedback about that was I believe it was on Mask of Momentum. I'm pretty sure it was on Mask of Momentum. I didn't do an actual count, but we got let's just say this. We got a lot of negative feedback on where we put Mask of Momentum. And the reason it was originally put at the time in that middle ground was it was very rare that people were letting you get all three hits. And the theory was that, if because of the way that people kind of figured out how to play around the mask and all that, it was that wasn't necessarily worth in the case of, I don't know why I said Ranger, in the case of Ninja, it wasn't necessarily worth spending that money when you weren't going to be able to use it except for just as a deterrent. So what I'm doing for the update on this is I'm moving Mask of Momentum up. I do believe the utility of Mask of Momentum has increased kind of for the reason that I just said, which was without the mask, you don't have the threat of it, so people don't necessarily have to play around it. So even though it's very rare, in many cases, I shouldn't say very rare, but in many cases, you don't often get your mask off. But the fact that you have your mask means that your opponent's put into a position where they have to make those choices, right? Like it's well known that like Kodachi 1 goes through, for Ira, for example, Kodachi 1 goes through, Kodachi 2 you block, right? Because it basically extends that chain, right? But putting your opponent in the position where they have to do that lets you get the card draw, that there is value for that. So now that the prices have come down, Mask of Momentum's still one of the more expensive ones, right? But now the prices have come down, I feel comfortable moving Mask of Momentum up. Also because people have just gotten better, right? And I think that putting them in that position where they have to make suboptimal decisions is worth more than it was when the game a year ago, 8 months ago in the game, right? That's basically 10 months ago in the game. That's basically the logic there. Right, next, so we did talk about Arcanite Skullcap a bit. The reason I'm actually keeping it where it is, but I wanted to address specifically why I'm not moving it up, right? It's obviously Skullcap being the generic equipment for the head. I mean, there's no doubt that this is probably one of the, like, if you were to pull any L, this would probably be, well, not any L, but if you were to pull any of the, like, basic legendary equipment, I believe that this one would be the one you'd be happiest to get, right? Because it's generic, you can use it anywhere, it can go across all your decks, it's super awesome. Not taking that away from it, but again, it still, for me, falls into that. If I have to make a decision as a player, it's like I have $150 and I have to make a decision as a player whether I want to get the Skullcap or want to get Tectonic Plating. And I know the numbers don't know this, but you understand what I'm saying, right? If I have to decide between one or the other, and I'm playing Guardian, obviously, I'm probably still going to get Tectonic Plating over the Skullcap, right? But if I'm looking at overall, if I want to play 4 or 5 different classes, sure, I'm going to get the Skullcap. And that's why I think the Skullcap still remains on that line, okay? So that's all I'm going to say there. Grasp of the Arcanite, I think it's pretty obvious why the utility is increased there. I've moved it all the way from nice to have to completely necessary. For a couple reasons. I mean, mainly it's just the blocking. Like, Chane's job, basically, right now, is to just kind of take hits until he can blow up on you. And having extra blockers to get those negative hit effects off if you need them is pretty strong. The ability to kind of dirtle and just poop out those rune chants while you're waiting for your souls to do so that your opponent still has to spin cards so they can't hit you as bad. Tons of value. I mean, we're seeing Chane everywhere. I think Grasp of the Arcanite's really important for Chane. And that's why I've moved it up all the way from could put your resources elsewhere to absolutely necessary. Now, that's not to say you couldn't still win without Chane. I know there's couldn't win with. I'm not saying you couldn't win with Chane without this, but it's pretty necessary to doing so at a high level, right? So I feel very comfortable putting Grasp of the Arcanite in the absolutely necessary category. The one I'm dropping is Skullbone Crosswrap. So Skullbone Crosswrap, the one for the Ranger, and keep in mind this may completely change when the next set comes out based on what Lexi does. I grant you that. But right now, with the addition of Seek Horizon, Rise Above, and a couple like Memorial Ground, I mean that's a base. I was gonna say a couple more. That's basically it, right? With the way that Rangers change with the availability of those cards in Monarch, I think it's actually in many cases you can make the argument to run Skullcap instead of Crosswrap. I have dropped it down into you can put the resources elsewhere just because I would still, even if I was only dead, which you guys know I'm a Ranger player, even if Ranger was the only thing I was ever going to play, I still think I'm pretty positive I would advise people to go get the Skullcap because it's just more functional from a better standpoint. So again, I'm comfortable putting this in it's okay. I mean, it's certainly going to be nice to have, but using that het slot's very, very valuable, and I think you could do better to put your resources elsewhere. So that's why I have Crosswrap bumped all the way down. Okay, and then the last one I want to speak to, I did a lot of debating on Brave Forge Bracers. So the reason Brave Forge Bracers comes up as a debate is because of Gallantry Gold, right? There's a lot of good arguments to be made on. I'm not saying Gallantry Gold is better than the Bracers. That's not what I'm saying. But there's a very good argument to be like, well, with Gallantry Gold out there, as a Warrior player who's looking at this on a budget, do you really need the Bracers? And I think the argument is no. But I've decided to leave Brave Forge Bracers in the nice-to-have category because what it does with taking away 2 damage, or taking away 2 block from Warrior's Fridge, I think is really, really impactful to Warrior. And even though the ability on Brave Forge doesn't get used all that often in the grand scheme of things, and even though Gallantry Gold has its advantage in certain decks, I think that overall, Bracers still, let's put it this way, Bracers doesn't deserve to be in the lower category. So what it might do is bump it down to that line in between, and I don't think that it belongs there either. So I think you can certainly go in and win a tournament without the Brave Forge Bracers. I think you can absolutely do it. You could be running the gold, no problem. Save yourself the money. But Brave Forge Bracers is just alone as part of the fridge, right? Even if it was a blank card, just alone as part of the fridge, I think makes it valuable, right? In its own way. And every now and then, maybe you will get the pop off, but it's pretty rare. All right, so just putting up again, summarizing where we stand. So we have Wizard and Guardian. And now we have Ninja and Runeblade in the absolutely essential category. We have Skullcap there right on the border. It's better than nice to have, but I wouldn't buy it over some of the ones in the absolutely essential. That's basically my stance. In nice to have, we have the Bracers, the Leathers, and the Heart. And then in the can live without category, we have the Crosswrap. All right, so we got 4 pieces of relevant legendary equipment. In Monarch, we got the Footsteps, we got the Vestige, we have Valiant Dynamo, and we have Carrion Husk. So where are these guys going to fit? So first discussion is on Valiant Dynamo. Valiant Dynamo, I am pretty securely putting in the can live without. Now, Valiant Dynamo, I'm not saying, I want to be very clear here. I'm not saying that Valiant Dynamo is a bad card. That's not what's being said here. What we're looking at is, because Kassai loves this, there are some Boltyn Saber builds that for sure love this card, right? So the question is, where are your resources best spent? If I were to have to pick between Dynamo and Bracers, what would I get? I'd recommend the Bracers, right? There's other, and let's not forget the fact that the Refraction Bolters are pretty good card, right? And sure, they don't get the again, I'm not saying that the Dynamo doesn't have its place. It's not what I'm saying. I'm just saying that if I have to pick and choose my resources, I'm going to be putting Valiant Dynamo in the can live without category, right? Because I believe that you could, because I think that the Bolters I think the Refraction Bolters are good enough. It's kind of the same argument as Gallantry Gold, right? It's I think the Bolters are good enough that they could do it. I mean, it's not quite the same because I'm in different categories, but I don't think that Dynamo is worth going out and buying over other stuff, other choices that you may have to make. All right, next up is Phantasmal Footsteps. This is the Illusionist legendary. I mean, this one I think pretty solidly goes into absolutely essential. Just the threat that this puts, get stuff canceled, War-Tune Herald that gets popped into another War-Tune Herald, all for 3, is pretty brutal. Having this available on demand for you to maintain that threat even after you get bloated it up is pretty good. I think this one's pretty necessary, right? I don't think there's a debate there. Now, as for the 2 non-class specific, we have Vestige of Soul and Carrion Husk. Both of them I've put squarely in the nice to have category. You could win a tournament without it, and in fact, we've seen that frequently. We've seen that Carrion Husk gets plenty of use, even in Chane sometimes. But most people I've seen have been using Skeleton. Even in a Chane build that's not like a Sonata build, I've seen people using the Skeleton. So there are options out there that can. That's why I'm saying it's nice to have. But again, if you have to make a decision on Carrion Husk or something else, I think that you could, have a pretty reasonable debate on where else to put those resources. That's all I'm saying, right? It's not that I have to. It's like you do not have to have Carrion Husk in order to win as Chane, right? Not like some of the other stuff. And then with Vestige of Soul, of course, it pairs very well for a couple of the deck strategies I've seen, lines of play I've seen with Prism. Vestige of Soul, again, I think is in the nice to have. She doesn't really have much of a chess piece other than Tunic. And again, that's the other debate there, is like if you're in this range, maybe you're talking about Vestige of Soul versus Tunic, what's more functional? In the Herald of Erudition play that you're trying to get off with all your auras, generally I think Vestige is probably what you want for your combo piece. But again, I think there's other options out there. So, can you live without it? I don't think it's fair to put that in there because it's kind of crucial to some of those combos working, or at least it's better to help get some of those combos or those lines of play off. But I think that alone saying that you have to have it, I don't think is fair either. So I feel comfortable, at least for now, while we're still, I know the next set's about to come out here, but it still feels that it's right to put both that and Carrion Husk in the nice to have while things continue to develop. So there you have it, across the screen. I mean, it's been up already, but so we have absolutely essential. We have what we saw before, adding in the new 4. Phantasmal goes in absolutely essential. Vestige and Carrion go in nice to have, and Valiant Dynamo I'm putting in the can live without. And again, don't hate me for that because I actually want the Dynamo. I'm working on getting myself a Dynamo. But again, it's just if you're fighting over where to spend your resources, if you're considering where to spend your resources, I think that Dynamo's lower on the purchase list than a lot of other stuff, like maybe even like some of your bolting blades and stuff, right? So anyway, that is it for today. So if you've watched to this point, thank you very much for doing so. I'm very excited to announce, and yes, you had to wait till the end of the video to get. I'm very excited to announce that I've been reached out to by LSS. They've given me some very exciting information about some stuff I'm going to be able to offer to you as viewers and to my channel members. So very exclusive stuff. I'm very, very excited about that and to see how that whole thing develops once it actually gets here. And then furthermore, we are approaching spoiler season, and you can make some assumptions about that. I'm comfortable saying that as well. So very, very exciting stuff coming down the pipeline. Definitely look for more announcements for that. And I just want to remind everybody, right, again, we are here all the time. We don't necessarily come out every day, but we talk about Flesh and Blood a lot here and in kind of a different wide range of things. Join the conversation below. I love to hear from you guys, interact with you guys. Make sure that if you're not already for whatever reason, just subscribe. Go ahead and give this video a like. Helps promote it and helps other people find it. And then if one of those buttons down there is the join button, consider joining up as a member. I've been putting up deck techs of, like I won a Blitz tournament 2 weeks ago. I won a Blitz tournament last Friday. I do deck techs for those, and they go up. And those are available to my channel members at the tech and strategy and above. And, come join us. Come join us on the Discord. We'd love to have you. We have a good time over there. Nice conversation. So anyway, thanks very much, folks, for your continued viewage, patronage, whatever you want to call it. Well, we don't want to use patronage because that implies Patreon, and that's not necessarily it. But thanks for being here, and go Commando.